Everybody, can I get a big round of applause for Jenny Weinbloom?
Wow, Disney's a hard act to follow. Cool. Hi, I'm Jenny Weinbloom. I'm a producer and creative director of Immersive Experiences. As we've established, currently executive producer of Meow Wolf Denver. And I've been in the immersive space for about 10 years now. And as they said, my background includes being part of the original producing team for Sleep No More, creating and producing immersive theater experiences with some of the amazing heavy hitters in this room today, like the Speakeasy Society and Optica Moderna, and large-scale brand experiences, branded experiential and international theme park projects. I feel like everyone's expressing their theater cred to start. So my background originally is creating and producing super scrappy, $0 budget queer performance art in dive bar basements in Brooklyn. And I still create super scrappy, $0 budget queer performance art in dive bar basements in Brooklyn. Admittedly, a little less frequently, but that's still a huge part of my creative practice. But I'm not really here to talk about my work. And I hate to disappoint, but I'm actually not really here to talk about Meow Wolf. Sorry if that's a bummer. I'm here to talk about your work. I'm here to talk about all of our work. Because I love this immersive field. I love immersive art. We all do, obviously. That's why we're here. And a big part of my kind of personal and theoretical practice over the past couple of years has been really thinking about what are the core tenets of why immersive work is so meaningful. Why do we love this work? Why do we crave it? What makes it so special, so repeatable, so thrilling, and frankly, empowering? And that's what really excites me, is what makes it so empowering. So I've been kind of creating these sort of 10 tenets of immersive work, but I only have 15 minutes, so I'm only gonna talk about one of them. And that's immersive as a catalyst for social change, which is really what today has been all about in one way or another, which is a pretty darn thrilling thing to be a part of. I believe that immersive work is an opportunity for us to practice and experience deep empathy. I believe that immersive work is an opportunity for us to experience tremendous generosity, both giving and receiving it. I believe that immersive art has democracy embedded in its DNA. And I believe that immersive work at its best, or at its most interesting to me, we all have different taste. I don't want to say at its best. What excites me the most is using immersive as an opportunity for rehearsal for resistance. And if immersive art, as I will posit, is inherently, or can be, I want to say can be, because we're all making different art. It can be inherently anti-authoritarian. But how can something be anti-authoritarian if there's no authority? Well, of course there is authority, and that's us. We, the creators, are the authoritative voice in the experiences that we create and are sharing with the world. How can we invite our participants in our work to push back against us, the creator? How can we invite them to be collaborators in that work, to be co-creators of their own experience, and to be empowered to truly use their free will? And free will, we're kind of weird about that as people. We don't always want to exercise it. We don't always know that we have it, which can be an uncomfortable space to be in. We are a collaborative species, and we really do like going with the herd a lot of the time. I know I do sometimes. I can be very non-confrontational sometimes. And so sometimes I love immersive work because it's an opportunity for me as a participant, as an audience member in that work, but I prefer the word participant, to really exercise my free will and get comfortable pushing back and get comfortable really using my voice and making critical decisions. what I think is really interesting is, personally, I am a little obsessed with being a good audience member, and I always have been. And I think it has a lot to do with being a deeply, deeply anxious person, and also being probably a little too narcissistic a person, and really feeling like when I am a participant in an immersive experience, I need to model good audience behavior. I want to make sure if I know anyone involved in this show, they're like, Jenny Weinbloom, that's a good kid. She's really engaging how we want her to, and she's really showing everyone what this engagement should look like. But I've recently been really questioning the idea of what is a good audience member. I'm going to temporarily use the term audience member here, even though it's not my preferred language, but I think it's useful for this thought. So in my experience, there are two sets of criteria that the vast majority of us apply when we think about the idea of what is a good audience member. And I think those two sets of criteria are in direct opposition to one another, yet I think we expect them in all scenarios. And on the one hand, we have curiosity, risk-taking, and presence, which I think are the things that everyone in this room get really jazzed about. We get jazzed about it when it happens to us, when we enter that mode, and we get jazzed about it from the participants in our experiences. But on the other hand, we have trust, obedience, and what I'm calling invisibility. But it's really more of the audience members are meant to be maybe seen and certainly not heard idea. And I want to question, what behavior are we rewarding with the art that we're making, with the experiences that we're building? If, I think a lot of you have been to Sleep No More and you know the elevator spiel, fortune favors the bold. But does it? I mean, but actually, what behavior are we inviting, what behavior are we encouraging, and what behavior are we rewarding from our participants? So, like I said, I've always been a good audience member, and I just want to I'm going to preface here with I'm going to talk a little bit about good and bad, and I'm just taking out of the equation for the moment actively destructive behavior. We're not talking about actively destructive behavior here. Let's just take it out of the equation for the moment, because again, it's only 15 minutes, and I don't have a timer. I don't know how long I've been talking. So we'll keep it out of the equation and stick with well-meaning audience behavior, well-meaning guest behavior, which is going to always be, by far, the vast majority of the participants in our experience. Frankly, Sleep No More and Meow Wolf are really dealing with two of the trickiest sets of participants, being children and drunk people. So if I think that the vast majority of participants are well-meaning, take my word for it for the moment. I think people want to engage gently. I think people want to engage lovingly with the work that we're making. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for a second. So I've really, over the past 2 years, been thinking about, what if I'm not so good as a participant, as an audience member? What if I push back against the boundaries of the experiences that I'm engaged in? And this kind of thinking really started for me when I experienced Screenshot Productions, Fear is What We Learned Here. And I know they're here today. They're awesome San Francisco-based company. And Fear is What We Learned Here, you know, in its very marketing materials, makes it very clear that this is a piece about fear and control, and how do those two things intersect with one another? And right from the very beginning of this experience, which is a solo experience, only one participant at a time, we're lying down on a bed and we're seeing projected above us images of dictators and authoritarian imagery. So we know right from the very start of this experience that we are questioning authority. And like, who's more authoritative, than the artist, generally speaking? So we already know, we've already created a framework in this piece that we're thinking critically about this very notion of obedience. And there's a scene in that piece where the participant is asked to bind the wrists of a prisoner who is an actor. And I love this scene. It made me deeply, deeply, cringingly uncomfortable, because this is really not my jam generally. But I was really, really deeply engaged by it. I've been thinking about it a lot for years now, because I had to make a decision. And I loved being empowered to make that decision. And I said no, and I didn't bind the prisoner's wrists. And I was told, no, you really, really have to. And I asked why. and I got satisfying answers. And I engaged in a dialogue where eventually the scene just ended and we had to move on with the piece, and we all just accepted that I wasn't gonna tie the guy up. But it was my first time kind of pushing back on the authority of the creator. So then I'm gonna taking it a step further, and where I really dove into this deeper was the Lust Experience by Darren and Clint, who spoke earlier. And they didn't really dive too deep into that in this conversation they had on stage. But at the Lust Experience, all audience members were instructed to remove their clothing at different points in the evening to different degrees. But the very basic level of, you're going to take something off. And there's a safe word, but the safe word is coward. And if you say it, you have to leave, and you won't be getting your money back, and it's kind of expensive. And there wasn't really an in-between ground here, as the rules are stated at the beginning of the evening. And that was another time where I was like, I'm gonna resist this. I'm going to be firm in my boundaries, and I'm just gonna say no. And the piece pushed back on me, and I was told I would have to leave, and I was like, cool, I'm okay with that. And I experienced something kind of surprising there, which was, of course, no one made me leave. And I stayed, and I experienced the piece, fully clothed in a very nice gown, I'll mention, and feeling like a fucking queen. Like, everyone, but also being very aware and feeling really weird about, like, all of my fellow participants in their varying states of undress, and there's me in my gown saying no, consistently, throughout the experience. And when the experience ended, a really interesting thing happened. All of us who had kind of been through the experience together were talking as people were putting their clothes back on, and I was putting my coat on, and we were talking about the experience, and I felt great. And a few of my fellow participants were really fucking mad at me. They really felt like I had ruined it for the group. And that it's not, it's not that they felt like they deserved my nudity or anything like that. They had no expectation of that, but more that it was a missed opportunity. And I kind of get it. I was on a track that was really interesting, and I engaged with it in a different way that wasn't what they were expecting. And according to Clint and Darren, how I engaged with it was what they were expecting, the creators. But I take them with a grain of salt after this presentation today. I don't know what to believe. But they're fucking with us. But, so there was this expectation of, you had this really cool opportunity, and if I had that opportunity, here's what I would have done, and you kind of fucked it up for the group. Well, that was really interesting. So we ended up in a whole dialogue about, what are the rules here? Someone actually said to me regarding a decision that they'd made that they were thinking about in a weird way. They said, I didn't realize that I could say no. And I said, this is real life. You can always say no. But that opens up an interesting question. Does the work that we're making play by the same rules as the larger world that we're in? And if not, why would they? And for the people fucking love the Lust Experience, engaging with it exactly the way they engage with it. And I, frankly, loved my experience with it. And I talked about it with Clint and Darren the other night. That it was a really meaningful, powerful experience for me because I exercised my free will. And I made decisions that I felt really good about. And was exactly the bad, resisting audience member that I felt like being in that moment. I want to open up a kind of third notion, which is that can an experience be inherently democratic if it's only for the good of the individual? Democracy is about us making choices for the good of the group, for the good of the whole, and us making those choices collaboratively and not making decisions on behalf of others. So the feedback that I got about how I fucked it up for others was really interesting for me, because I was thinking, here I was engaged in this democratic experience, but it was mine and mine alone, and only I reaped the benefits of it. This wasn't a shared experience my experience wasn't something I was sharing with others. So a piece that made me think about was Eric Zimmerman and Natalie Posey created a piece in 2017 for the Museum of Science in Boston called Waiting Rooms. That was a series of waiting rooms, deeply bureaucratic experiences, think the DMV or going through customs, where you went from room to room, waiting in line, and then waiting in another line. You finally get through, and then you're in another line, until finally some participants decided, fuck this, were toppling the authority of this experience, which turned out to be exactly what the game was all about. And that was how you win the game, was by not playing. And they had to collaborate in order to make it through. Well, that's democracy in action. That is a group choosing to work together for the betterment of the herd. Well, that's pretty exciting. But now on a totally other side of this, from the consent and autonomy side, there's also just the fact that audience members and participants are the variable in the work that we create. And they surprise us constantly. And when they surprise us, sometimes they make magic that we couldn't have possibly imagined. So in Sleep No More, we experienced frequently people building shrines in the halls of the McKittrick. They would roll the taxidermied goat out of the forest and into the hallway of High Street and surround it with battery-operated candles and flowers and artifacts from the space they'd pulled from other rooms. And this really frustrated stage management, which is understandable. And I kind of loved it, even though it was obstructive and in the way and a fire hazard. It was all kinds of issues. But it opened up a question of, are we going to assume good intentions of our audience? Are they being destructive dicks? Or are they summoning Hecate? Well, that's fucking cool. Or at the House of Eternal Return, when it first opened, we would have experiences, I should say I wasn't there yet, but Meow Wolf would have experiences of participants who would come in costume, especially during Halloween week. And you have participants in costume, and in one specific scenario, these two participants saw one another in their costumes, both thought the other were performers, and then spent 2 hours non-verbally interacting with each other through movement, both thinking the other was a performer. Or we had a woman who would do tarot readings in the desert trailer at the House of Eternal Return. And Meow Wolf could have said, you can't do that. You can't sell your tarot readings here. But instead, Meow Wolf said, you want to be on payroll doing your tarot readings in the desert trailer? Because they surprise us and they make magic. I have a really sweet anecdote from the Speakeasy Society, but I'm so out of time. But I'll quickly say, the Johnny Cycle, which is a piece that I love. The night that I saw this piece, which is a pretty heavy and intense piece, right before the piece started, an older gentleman who had a thick accent asked me, what is immersive theater? And before I could answer, they were like, show starting, everybody in. And I was like, oh, he's gonna have fun. All right. And it turns out he's the dad of one of the company members, and he's a regular. He should know at this point. But he's a really loving and challenging participant in the work. Throughout the piece, he kept asking questions of the characters, but with beautiful intention and interrupting monologues with kind of feedback and thoughts. And during this one scene, which I love this scene where they're in these 2 rows, this guy, Martine's dad, which is the only name I know him by, stood at the center of those 2 rows and slowly raised his arms like Christ beseeching to the rows of ghosts. And I was weeping. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I think Speakeasy was not overjoyed. But it was magic. It's the variable, it's the X factor. Our participants are co-creators in the work, ideally, if you empower them to be. You, Me, Bum Bum Train, I have to talk about it in 30 seconds, but in the UK, giant experiences for a single audience member at a time where 500 volunteers surround them and put them in a semi-improvised experience where 1 second they're in a mosh pit, and then the next second they're being pushed in a laundry chute, or they're in an ambulance, or they're coaching an NFL team, or they're a piece of sushi on a conveyor belt. And it's this incredible exercise in empathy and in imagining what it is to be the other. And yes, it's only for one participant at a time, but what I love about this is that it's so powerful, and people consider it like a seminal life experience. Who do you think those 500 volunteers are? They're all the people who went through it before. And that connects to generosity. Ida talked about the pocket watch and gifting the pocket watch to experience the night Heron. I fucked it up, and I went back the next night with my pocket watch, and I got in trouble because the intention was all, what? I know, I was, I'm sorry, but it was so magical I wanted to share it with someone, but I was so moved when I realized the real intention of to share it without being a co-participant in the experience with that person. Quickly, I'm just gonna touch on punch-drunk mode. I call it punch-drunk mode. When people go to Sleep No More, and I think the same thing happens at the House of Eternal Return, and I think it happens at a lot of the experiences that we all create, it changes the way people move and the way people think and the way people touch. You look at people in the McKittrick Hotel and they're moving slowly, legato. They're picking up the movement vocabulary of the performers and they're touching objects with this incredible intentionality. And then you'll see at 11 o'clock at night, walking down 23rd Street in Chelsea, some finance bros carrying a mask, but looking with intense curiosity down an alleyway. And we've changed them. At the House of Eternal Return, you see children playing and adults playing in this really intense way in the space. And they're playing with a curiosity that's all about how was it made? It's so human. It has such a human touch to it. There are literal fingerprints all over this work. And people explore it thinking, I can do that. It's craft. It's on a human scale. And that makes change. And Scott talked about, building a generation of kids who who know what it is to make a choice and know that their choices have meaning. All this fits together. It's so powerful. That's one of the things that excites me most about the work. So I'll just close with this thought, which is, when we next meet, we are going to be in the middle of a presidential primary. It's going to be intense. But between now and then, over the next year, we have the opportunity to make work that helps to create participants in democracy in the world, or in our country. Participants who question authority, even if that authority is ours, who are empathetic, who are generous, who are ready to be challenged and engaged, who are curious. And I think that's a damn exciting opportunity that we have to make change through the work that we create. And the gift of inviting people to really play with their free will and to practice resistance and make choices. And I'm just gonna close with a quote from one of my favorite New York down and gritty queer performance artists, the world famous Bob, which is her legal name. Nice is the new fierce. Let's make kind work, and let's be kind to one another, and see you next year.